My name is Alcock. I am the Suicide Safer Community Coordinator for Allerdale Copeland, which is a really long, silly title, but basically my role is about engaging with communities across West Cumbria to devise and create suicide prevention initiatives and to work with those communities at a grassroots level. And I work for Every Life Matters, and we're a county-wide suicide prevention charity. If you've never come across us before, what do we do? Well, there's a variety of different things. There's 3 strands to our work. We provide training to anybody at all. We provide free-to-access training to upskill individuals to have open, honest conversations around suicide. We also provide a suicide bereavement support service. Tragically, we lose far too many people to suicide across our region. So that's a key cornerstone of what we try to provide as a charity, to make sure that support is almost immediate when that suspected suicide happens within a family. And also our Suicide Safer Communities work. I'm looking at that screen. I've got a screen right there. What am I doing? Our Suicide Safer Communities work, which is that grassroots approach to suicide prevention. So before I really get started, I want to talk a little bit about some of the myths and facts around suicide. I want to touch a little bit around the stats as well, about why this is such an issue within our area. But before I do that, I just want to kind of mention that I'm going to be talking about suicide, and I think we have to address the elephant in the room, really. For many of us, we might have been touched by suicide, we might have lost a loved one, we might have even experienced our own thoughts of suicide. So wherever I go, I just like to remind people to look after yourself. If you are suddenly feeling that inertia, that uneasiness as I'm talking, hopefully it's not just me talking, but if you are feeling that uneasiness and you need to step out of the room, that's totally okay. We've got the wonderful helpers with their sashes, so please just let them know that you are okay. So, myths and facts surrounding suicide. 1 in 17 people will experience thoughts of suicide in a lifetime. That is a huge number of people who will be touched by these thoughts. And when we talk about thoughts of suicide, it's really important to understand that they will impact everybody completely differently. Many people will simply have passing thoughts of suicide, and others will move further along that continuum and really experience that planning and that preparation and that acting on those thoughts of suicide. But what I want to get across more than anything about this is just because somebody's thinking about suicide does not make it inevitable. Okay, if there's one thing you remember from what I've said today, please let it be that. Just because somebody's thinking about it does not make it predestined that they will end their life. But what it means is they're probably going to need some level of intervention, they're going to need some level of support, and just as we've heard from Jake there, there is a lot of support out there. There's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of support in this room, and further within our county as well. So 1 in 17 is a huge number of people, massive amount of people across our communities, within our organisations, that are impacted by these thoughts of suicide. When we break that down further, it's actually equated to be about 1 in 5 people in a lifetime will experience thoughts of suicide. Now that is an incredibly high number of people who will think about suicide at some point in their life. When we think about the number of people we interact with on a daily basis, the number of people in our workplace, in our communities, the number of people here today, it's a massive cross-section of people who will experience thoughts. And again, we draw all this data from the Adult Psychiatric Morbidity Survey. I haven't just wandered up here and started pulling these numbers out of thin air. So we take this from the Adult Psychiatric Morbidity Survey, which tells us that thoughts of suicide are relatively common. And I always follow that up with, well, why are we not talking about it? Why are we still feeling this uneasiness about talking about the subject of suicide when so many people are touched by it? So across the UK, we lose 1 individual to suicide every 90 minutes. The most recent stats that we have for England put that at 4,912 individuals that died by suicide, and I always like to make sure that we quote that number accurately and correctly, because that's every life lost is a brother, a sister, a father, a mother. It's a connection to somebody, it's a colleague. There is an impact there beyond that initial death. It ripples out across that community. Looking at Cumbria, we do lose an individual to suicide every 5 to 6 days on average. And specifically around North Cumbria, our rates are quite worrying. Our rates of suicide within Cumbria are higher than the national average, and particularly across areas of West Cumbria as well. We've already had some brilliant conversations around poverty, around deprivation, around access to services, and all of that plays a part in this as well. we know that when people aren't getting the support, or they can't access the help that they need, it may lead them to spiral into that experience of thoughts of suicide, or that mental health issue getting to the point where they perhaps can't see any other way out. So just again, some more information related to the 100,000. So again, we are higher than the national average. Barrow is particularly high. The numbers in Barrow are incredibly worrying, actually. But yeah, again, we always come from the perspective that suicide is everybody's issue, and everybody's got a part to play in keeping people safe. So yeah, just again, reinforce those stats there. Many people think that suicidal people do not ask for help, that they will just lock everything away, that they'll keep it hidden. As we've heard from Jake there, he talked about his aggression, he talked about his drinking. Those actually could be invitations, they could be the signs that somebody is experiencing thoughts of suicide. But people don't walk around with a placard, they don't walk around saying suicide is the only answer. They walk around internalising all these really complex and multifaceted feelings that they hide away. But they will give us clues, they will give us these little invitations, perhaps by the way that they're acting, the things that they're saying, the way that they're behaving. So we can pick up on these, we can spot them, but we just need to know what they are to be able to make those interventions. And I used that word there, invitations, and that's what they are. They're invitations. Because if you send somebody an invitation, what are you wanting? Response. Thank you. I sometimes do that and nobody responds. So it's that, isn't it? It's quite rude to ignore an invitation, isn't it? So when somebody's sending us that invitation that they're experiencing these thoughts of suicide, it's our social duty to respond to that, to pick up on those signs and start that conversation, because it could potentially be life-saving. Another thing I like to remind people is, and this is a common myth that still pervades as well, is that only experts can prevent suicide. Now my animations work. They didn't on the other slides, but here we go. Only experts can prevent suicide. What an absolute load of rubbish. Anybody can prevent suicide. Anybody could be the person that makes that life-saving intervention, that starts that meaningful conversation. Only 25% of people who die by suicide are in contact with mental health services. I think that is a staggering statistic, because that means there's a huge number of people out within our communities that are losing their life to suicide, but are not being picked up by services. And as Jake talked about, it might be because there's stigma surrounding that. It might be because they feel like there's no help, any more help available to them. But what that means is, sorry, 27%, changed that stat last night, it's recently increased. What that means is there's opportunities to intervene there based within the communities that we live, the communities that we create and carve for ourselves within our workplace as well. So there is always an opportunity to intervene. So how do we reduce suicides? After all that very, very bleak input there is an opportunity to reduce suicides. There is an opportunity for us as individuals to make a difference with that. And I want to touch on some of the fantastic work that's going on out west with the various partners and the various champions that are really pushing this agenda and really getting more people engaged in the conversation. But we need to draw on the evidence base. We need to understand that there's 4 areas around how we reduce the number of suicides across our county. And we can break them up like this. We have the safer communities approach. We have issues around tackling that stigma, which we've heard about from the video there already. Safer services as well, and also that post-vention support. And yeah, I'll talk through each of these in a little bit more detail now, and I'll do my best to not run over time as well. So safer services. We need to make sure that services are equipped to deal with individuals who are experiencing these thoughts. So as I said, 25% of people dying by suicide are not in touch with mental health services. How do we today make our services more accessible to these individuals who are feeling this way? How do we make sure that there's clear pathways of support? You know, the Hub of Hope is a fantastic resource. So how are we making sure that the people that we're supporting know about that resource so that they can get the help they need? Are we making sure that key gatekeepers, receptionists, that is a key gatekeeper? I'm thinking about your GP, you know, your pharmacist. I'm picking on healthcare here, but you know, there's lots of key gatekeepers that could have a level of suicide intervention training, that could pick up on those signs and start that initial conversation. And it's also about managing that risk as well. Where do we signpost people to? You know, are we making sure that there's no wrong door? If somebody comes to us with a mental health concern, Are we just kind of fobbing them off and saying, oh, well, actually, that's not my area of work? Or are we proactively making sure that we can find them the right support and signpost them to the right organisation, the right people? And this one's really, really important, and I say this word so much, but it's about that compassion as well. And I know that whether we work within health service, third sector, or private sector, that compassion fatigue can kick in, and we ask so much of ourselves, and we give so much of ourselves to other people that sometimes that compassion can drain away from us. But it's remembering that compassion can ignite that little glimmer of hope in somebody that could connect them with that reason for living. So always remaining caring and compassionate to the people that walk through the door that's seeking help. The next step to creating suicide-safer communities and tackling these stubbornly high suicide rates is that bereavement support as well. Suicide bereavement is a unique loss. It's been described as one of the most difficult and lonely experiences a person can have, being left with an overwhelming jumble of feelings and thoughts and complex emotions. And it's often described as being as unique and individual as a fingerprint. And even people within the same family will be affected differently. And we've heard some great conversations today about bereavement and how it is so unique and how it's something that we carry with us all the time. And even more so when it becomes suicide bereavement as well. So how do we make sure that services are signposting to the right organisations? How do we make sure that those long-term physical and mental health issues are being addressed and putting that support in place immediately after that suicide, but also that long-term support as well, signposting to the likes of SBS, CBUK, and making sure that everybody is aware of grief and bereavement training that they can kind of do to add to their toolkit as well. And then it's about tackling that stigma. It's about being comfortable and confident having conversations about this. That's why I always start sessions with myths, because they do pervade, we do naturally just assume these things, and until we're told otherwise, you know, it shines a spotlight on something that we weren't aware of. So we need to be proactive in tackling those myths and those stigmas surrounding it. The impact of the language that we use, terms like committing suicide, an unsuccessful attempt. There's nothing successful about suicide. You know, completed suicide, you wouldn't say somebody completed cancer, would you? So being conscious about ourselves as professionals and the language that we use that may add to that stigma or may add to somebody else's pain and distress as well. And then finally, it's about that grassroots approach. And I can tell you that this is where a lot of good and a lot of positive things are happening. We need to engage our communities in this. We need to know that people are passionate and willing and wanting to make a difference, and oh my God, they are, and they do some absolutely incredible things. And it's just increasing their confidence to do so as well. You know, I brought things like this with me today, a suicide prevention resource tin. All that's got in it is a stack of resources on how to support somebody with their thoughts of suicide. But you'll be surprised how much confidence that gives practitioners by simply having the resources at hand. Because I'm sure you've all felt that, where somebody's walked in with an issue and you haven't known how to support them, and that fear sets in, doesn't it? But something as simple as that, having a piece of paper to just settle those nerves and understand that you've got something to give to someone there. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the work that's going on in West Cumbria now across Allerdale and Copeland, what was formerly Allerdale and Copeland. So I want to highlight some great partnership work that we've done recently. So we've been working with Cumberland FA, trying to get messages of suicide prevention out into different communities. I am not the right person to go and talk to football players and rugby players, okay? But it's finding the right people who can go and talk to those individuals. You know, things like that. I'm plugging my local football team here. This is Seaton Rangers. Got the Every Life Matters logo on the side of their shirt to build conversations with other teams, to raise that little bit of awareness, getting them onto our training so that they know how to spot the signs and support their teammates. You know, doing short talks with Cumberland FA and just giving them that confidence to talk about the subject. They will honestly tell you, and Ben, the CEO of Cumberland FA, tells me all this all the time. He says, I'm not an expert, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but if you can give us the right information, we'll get it out to the audience that you need it to go to. And that is a great example of collaborative community work. I'm going to talk a lot about Maryport as well, because Maryport's absolutely brilliant. So we launched our Suicide Safer and our Allerdale initiative in Maryport. We've worked with, there's just so many brilliant things going on in Maryport. So over lockdown, we contributed materials to the Maryport Matters magazine, all around kind of looking after yourself, looking after other people, at a time where we really needed to hear those messages as well. Wonderful, wonderful mental health champion in Maryport called Alison, who does some incredible work within her community. Alison sadly lost her son, Gary Jack, to suicide, and that has just lit a fire under her to just make such a difference within her area. She set up her own cuppa and a crack group to just have conversations with people about their mental health. We talk about tier 1 support. This is even before tier 1. This is just low-level conversations before it escalates. She regularly fundraises. She raises awareness about mental health. She produces resources. She goes into schools. She gives information to people. That's what we need. We need people who are passionate about the subject and want to make that difference. She commissioned this incredible mural in Maryport Town Centre to remind people that there's hope, that there's help out there, you know, bright and colourful and really, really positive, and with helplines on there as well. So just a great example of what one person can do. One person with some drive and determination. We also commissioned other pieces of work as well. So this was a mural that went up in Moor Row. When we started doing this, the residents were coming out and saying, "What's the mural about? What are you painting?" And we said, "Oh, it's going to be about suicide prevention." And they went, "Oh, right, oh." Got a few funny looks. People were a little bit worried, a little bit concerned. But as it started to grow, and it happened, and they seen what it was and what it was about, they engaged with it. The conversations we had on the day, I cannot tell you, were absolutely amazing. People stopping in the car, in the car drive past, to want to talk to us and tell us about their own experiences, and it created a connection. And all it is some paint on a wall. At its simplest form, it's paint on a wall, but it created this sense of people wanting to talk about it. I want to speak a little bit about another great project out west as well. So Chicks are a group of parents who've been impacted by mental health issues, and they are just chomping at the bit to do something about it. They are challenging services, they are raising awareness. They've been down to Parliament to lobby MPs. They've probably scared the life out of the trust, the amount of emails and the amount of people that they've talked to get answers about why services, in their opinion, are not adequate enough, because it's built off that personal experience. So Emma Jane, in that picture on the left-hand side there, her daughter waited 10 hours in A&E before somebody would come and speak to her. And her daughter was actively suicidal and was planning to end her life, and it took 10 hours before somebody came and provided a level of support. That's not good enough. So services like this are there to, groups like this are there to challenge it, but from that grassroots level as well. And then on to something a little bit weirder. Social media campaigns, social media, let's face it, we're always on it, it's always there, it's always prevalent. We tried to rally together some local Cumbrian celebrities. I know what you're thinking, there's not many, you're right. But what we did find was a lot of passionate people who wanted to speak about the topic of suicide, and we created some short videos, and that reached some totally random audiences we never thought it would reach. So this is Dickie Dickinson, a comedian from Shap, and it just got to people that we wouldn't expect to normally reach. Brace yourselves for the next one. I feel like I don't want to provide any context to this, just allow you to think about why I've shown this one. This is a group of lecturers and students from the University of Cumbria who fundraised for us. They climbed Helvellyn in Speedos. I don't know if you can tell. But yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's a bit wacky, it's a bit unusual, but you know what? It started some brilliant conversations. Various people walking past, wanting to talk to them, why, and it just really catches the eye. Probably a poor choice of words, but it inspires people to think differently about how we engage others in communications about suicide. Working with those bereaved as well. This is a booklet that we have a lived experience group that we support as part of Every Life Matters, and they really guide our bereavement support service. And based upon their feedback, we've created this booklet called By Your Side, which provides information about all the bereavement support available within Cumbria nationally, and that is given to them almost at that immediacy of a suspected suicide as well. So making sure we hear that voice of lived experience, and I feel like that's a common theme today. It's hearing people's experiences and building that into our practice. That's what we need to be doing. And a shameless plug about our training as well. A big strategy for us is making sure everybody is equipped to have these conversations, whether that be NHS staff, police, teachers, youth workers, cleaners, dinner ladies, or dinner nanas, did somebody call it before? I really like that term. You know, making sure that everybody's got a level of training, because suicide is everybody's business. Anybody could be impacted by suicide at some time in their life, so surely everybody should have a level of training and be prepared in case that ever happens. So, yeah, before we finish, I just want to remind you that there is hope. You know, I put some fairly bleak statistic towards you there, but I feel really hopeful, because there's a lot of incredible partners that we work with, and I'm not up here standing here saying, look at all the incredible things Every Life Matters have done. We have barely been involved with a lot of these things. This is the passion of the individuals pushing this forward, driving it forward. We've merely helped them and given them the resources or given them the information that they need. So we need to make sure that we build on those networks together and do what we can. So that's why I feel so hopeful that we can make a difference to the suicide rates across Cumbria. And I just want to remind you to look after yourself. It's been a very long day today. It's been a very interesting day, but no doubt it's been very kind of mentally draining as well. All these really interesting conversations, lots to think about on the journeys home. But I just want to remind you to look after your mental health and look after your well-being. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions at all, please come and ask me. Yeah, and I'll hand over now. Thank you very much.